There is a kind of silence that only happens when someone in a room stops pretending, and this story begins inside that silence. A young woman lay dying on a hospital bed, while her husband stood 12 feet away calculating what her death was worth. He did not know that a nurse was listening, charting quietly at her station, catching every word he never meant to say aloud. He did not know that the doctor fighting to save his wife had already seen what kind of man he was. And he certainly did not know that his wife was carrying a secret her own body had hidden for months. This is the story of Odera Kaplan, a high-risk delivery specialist who refused to stop working when every monitor said it was over. It is the story of Lena Hargrave, 26 years old, who came in at midnight and flatlined before dawn. It is the story of a hallway where 3 people waited, not with grief, but with patience that looked like hunger. A husband who had already rewritten the deed to their home and brought his mistress to the hospital disguised as family. A mother-in-law who had never once spoken Lena's name without making it sound like something she had stepped in. And a woman in a red silk blouse who stood too close and said nothing, and waited for a phone call that would change everything. But something happened in that delivery room that none of them had planned for. Something small and doubled and impossibly alive. What the doctor found on the second ultrasound changed every calculation that man had ever made about his wife's worth. And what the nurse heard in that hallway would become the single piece of evidence that saved a mother and her children. Stay with me now, because what happens next in this story will sit inside your chest long after it ends. And it begins right here. Belmont Regional Hospital sits on the edge of a town where the river bends and the streetlights flicker past 10 at night. It is not a large hospital, but it has a maternity ward on the 4th floor, where the windows face east toward the sunrise. Nurse Gwendolyn had worked that floor for 9 years and knew its rhythms the way a sailor knows weather. She could tell by the sound of a hallway whether the news coming was good or whether she should brace herself quietly. On the night of March 11th, the hallway sounded wrong to her before anyone said a single word about it. Lena Hargrave arrived at 11:58, brought in by ambulance, 38 weeks along with a tear in her placenta that was moving fast. She was 26 years old with dark braided hair and a face that still looked like it belonged in a college lecture hall. She was conscious when they brought her in, gripping the rail of the gurney and asking if her baby was still moving. Dr. Odera Kaplan met them at the elevator, already gloved, already reading the paramedic notes on a tablet in her left hand. Odera was 35, born in Lagos, trained in Philadelphia, and she carried calmness like a weapon she had sharpened for years. She did not raise her voice in emergencies because she had learned that panic is a contagion and stillness is a cure. She looked at Lena once, held her gaze, and said, "I am going to take care of you, and I do not say that lightly." Lena nodded, and something in her face released. Not the fear, but the loneliness underneath it, the part that had arrived alone. By 12:40, Lena's blood pressure was falling in the slow, steady way that means the body is deciding things the doctors have not. Odera ordered a second ultrasound and stood at the screen in the blue light, studying what she saw with her jaw set tight. She called Gwendolyn into the room and pointed at the screen without speaking, and Gwendolyn looked and then looked again. There were 2 heartbeats on the monitor, not one, and the second had been hidden behind the first for almost the entire pregnancy. Odera had suspected it since week 22, when a shadow on the scan refused to resolve into anything the system could label. She had tracked it privately, appointment after appointment, telling no one until she was certain, and now she was certain. "Twins," she said quietly, and the word sat in the room like a second heartbeat that had finally decided to announce itself. At 1:15 in the morning, a man walked into the ward with the stride of someone who expected hallways to widen for him. His name was Darius Hargrave, 32, broad and clean-shaven, wearing a watch that cost more than Gwendolyn earned in a month. He leaned into Lena's room, pressed his lips to her forehead while she was still conscious, squeezed her hand once, then stepped out. He made a phone call in the corridor that lasted 4 minutes, and when he hung up, he did not go back inside. 10 minutes later, a woman appeared beside him wearing a red silk blouse, introduced to staff as his cousin visiting from upstate. Her name was Inez, and Gwendolyn noted that no cousin stands that close or touches a man's wrist like that while his wife bleeds. Then came the third, his mother, Philippa Hargrave, mid-60s, pearl earrings, cashmere, a face that had never been told no and showed it. Philippa acknowledged her daughter-in-law's emergency the way a woman acknowledges a delayed flight, with irritation she barely bothered to conceal beneath politeness. Gwendolyn watched all three of them from her station, and what she saw was not a family waiting, but a formation holding position. At 3:21, Lena's heart stopped, and Odera called the code and started compressions before the crash cart reached the door. The team worked in controlled silence, the kind that sounds like held breath multiplied by 6 people who refuse to accept the obvious. Odera's hands moved with a precision that came from years of refusing to let go of patients the numbers said were already gone. At 3:24, she made the decision to deliver both babies by emergency cesarean while continuing resuscitation, because waiting meant losing all 3. It was the kind of choice that exists only at the far edge of what medicine allows and what a human being can endure. Twin 1 was delivered at 3:29, 3 pounds 9 ounces, silent for 4 seconds before a cry broke through like a crack in ice. Twin 2 came at 3:31, 4 pounds even, breathing on her own before anyone in the room had permission to feel relief. The pressure release from the delivery gave Odera the opening she needed, and at 3:44, Lena's heart found a rhythm again. It was not dramatic. It was a flutter, then a beat, then a pattern that steadied itself like someone finding their footing after falling hard. Odera stood at the monitor and watched the line climb and hold, and something unclenched in her chest that she had not felt tighten. She looked at Lena on the bed, 26 years old, dark hair fanned on the pillow, oxygen mask fogging, alive and not yet aware of it. At 3:58, Odera stepped into the hallway, and Darius looked up from his phone with a face arranged for the occasion. "She is alive," Odera said, and watched 2 seconds of silence cross 3 faces before they chose which expressions to wear next. Darius said "thank God" at the correct volume and with the correct expression, but he said it 1 full second too late, and Gwendolyn noticed. Philippa asked when they could see her, and Odera said "not yet," with a weight in those 2 words that filled the hallway. Then Odera said, "There is something else I need to discuss with all 3 of you," and she led them toward the consultation room. Gwendolyn stayed at her station, but the consultation room had a window, and she had charting to do directly across from it. She watched Darius receive the news about the twins, and saw his face do something that was not joy reshaping itself, but math recalculating. She watched Philippa's hand rise to the pearls at her throat, and stay there like she was checking they had not been taken from her. She watched Inez look at Darius, and watched Darius not look back, and the distance between those 2 glances said everything words would not. But before the consultation room, at 3:51, Gwendolyn had heard something she was never meant to hear, and she had not forgotten it. Darius had spoken low, but not low enough, and what he said was, if she does not make it, the policy doubles and the house title reverts. Philippa's reply was quieter, but Gwendolyn caught 3 words clearly, and those 3 words were, finally, about time. Gwendolyn had set her pen down, looked at the door to room 11, thought about Odera fighting on the other side of it, and picked her pen back up. She wrote what she heard in her personal notes, dated it, timed it, and put the paper in her locker, because she understood what she had witnessed. Lena woke 40 hours later to find Odera sitting beside the bed, not standing, sitting, and that was how she knew before any words that it was going to be all right. Because doctors who sit down are not delivering catastrophe, they are staying. And Odera stayed and told her everything, gently and completely, in order. Lena listened to the part about her heart stopping, and the part about the twins, and the part about the 3 people in the hallway. Her face went still in the way faces go still when a person is deciding not whether to grieve, but who they will become afterward. She looked at Odera and said, "I want to speak with a lawyer before I speak with my husband." And Odera said, "I can arrange that," without a single pause. The lawyer came on day 3, and Gwendolyn's dated notes became the foundation of something Darius had never imagined anyone had been building. Darius arrived on day 4 with florist-wrapped roses, stood in the doorway, and said Lena's name like a man performing a scene he had rehearsed in the car. Lena told him what she knew, what she had started, and what she would no longer accept, in the voice of a woman who had died and come back unafraid. He offered apologies that varied in quality, and explanations she had not asked for, and she let him finish because she no longer needed him to be different. He left 2 hours later, and the roses stayed on the windowsill, catching light beside 2 bassinets that were no longer empty. She named them B and Kessler, her grandmother's middle names that felt right for children who arrived against every odd there was. B slept with her fists curled tight, like she was holding something invisible she refused to surrender, and Kessler watched the light with serious eyes. Odera visited room 11 every day for the 13 days Lena stayed, sometimes briefly, sometimes just standing at the window watching the sunrise come in. Once, in the quiet afternoon with both babies asleep, Lena said, "You stayed?" And Odera said, "Yes," and neither of them needed the silence explained. "You already knew about them," Lena said, and Odera said, "I had been watching both of them since week 22, every appointment, waiting to be sure. You know this feeling, the moment you realized someone had been quietly protecting you long before you knew you needed it, and you carry that feeling still. Was there ever a person who stayed for you when leaving would have been easier? Someone whose quiet presence changed the direction of everything that followed? Remember that the kindness you show when no one is watching is the truest measure of who you are, and it always finds its way back. Remember that your worth is never decided by the people who calculate it, but by the ones who fight for it when you cannot fight yourself. And if you are holding on through something hard right now, hold on a little longer, because the people who stay are already on their way to you. If this story touched your heart tonight, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories and share it with someone who needs to hear that staying matters more than anything.